Before we dive in, if you love epic tales of war, strategy, hit that subscribe and like button, turn on notifications, and join our growing legion of warriors. Now, let's begin. Imagine a universe where humanity is nothing more than a whispered legend. A ghost story passed between alien species who have never seen a single trace of their existence. The great empires of the galaxy, vast, sprawling civilizations that had stood for tens of thousands of years, kept records of their own rise, their wars, their triumphs, and their myths. And among those myths was a name spoken only in hushed voices, a name buried so deep in historical archives that even scholars debated whether it had ever been real. Humanity. It was said they had once walked among the stars, their warships blotting out suns, their armies rewriting the balance of power in the cosmos, but there was no proof, no homeworld, no ruins, no wreckage of their fabled fleets, not a single trace. The most powerful civilizations dismissed them as a fabrication, an ancient tale designed to frighten children and keep young empires in line. After all, if such a species had truly existed, how could they have simply vanished? That was what Lyra had been taught her entire life. The Valkyrie were a species of seekers, obsessed with knowledge, with unraveling mysteries that others deemed impossible. They had built their empire on the art of detection, developing the most advanced scanning and reconnaissance technology in the known galaxy. If something was out there, they would find it. If a civilization existed, no matter how well hidden, they would uncover it. And yet, in all her years of training, in all her time serving aboard reconnaissance vessels, Lyra had never seen even the faintest sign that humanity had ever been real. Until now. She sat frozen in her command chair, staring at the impossible readings flashing across her screen. Her ship, the Vigilance, was patrolling a remote sector at the edge of known space, an assignment she had thought would be uneventful. It was an empty region, devoid of planets, asteroids, or anything of interest. No ships traveled through this, part of the void. No civilizations claimed it. It was a dead zone, untouched and unexplored. And yet, something had just appeared. One moment, the sector was empty. The next, her ship's long-range sensors screamed to life, detecting a massive object in the void where there had been nothing just seconds before. No hyperspace distortion, no subspace rift, no gravitational disturbances that would indicate an approaching vessel. It was as if it had been there all along, lurking in the darkness, waiting to be noticed. A cold shiver ran down Lyra's spine. She had spent years tracking hidden fleets, uncovering cloaked reconnaissance probes, and identifying false signals designed to deceive lesser civilizations. But nothing about this made sense. She expanded the scan, analyzing the energy signature radiating from the unknown object. That was when her heart truly began to race. The energy output was unlike anything she had ever seen. It wasn't just powerful, it was astronomical. No known civilization in the galaxy used a power source this dense, this efficient. If the readings were accurate, this vessel, if it even was a vessel, generated more energy than some star systems. And yet, it was eerily silent. No transmissions, no distress signals, no IFF codes identifying its origin. It was just there. She swallowed hard and activated the ship's advanced scanning systems, sending out a high-frequency pulse to get a better reading. The data flooded in, and what she saw made her stomach drop. The structure was ancient. Not in the way derelict ships were, not corroded wreckage drifting in space. This ship, if she could even call it that, was designed to last. It was composed of alloys that didn't exist in any known database, materials that had no known counterpart in modern engineering. The hull was impossibly thick, reinforced beyond anything she had ever encountered, layered with defensive coatings that absorbed nearly all known forms of energy. This wasn't just a warship. This was a fortress, built to withstand destruction on a scale that should have been impossible. Her breathing was shallow as she read further. The design was alien, completely unfamiliar, and yet there were patterns, symmetry, a precision that felt almost purposeful. She zoomed in on a segment of the hull, analyzing the markings embedded within the structure. Time had worn them down, but the scanner slowly reconstructed the original inscriptions. And then, Her blood ran cold. Human text. It was faint, almost erased by the passage of time, but undeniable. A single word, written in an extinct language that no living species spoke anymore. A word she had only ever seen in forbidden historical records, in stories dismissed as nonsense. Humanity. Her vision blurred for a moment, her hands trembling. Over the console. No. That was impossible. Humans were a myth, a fabrication, a bedtime story told to keep civilizations in check. They were never real. They couldn't be real, and yet, the ship floating before her was real. She barely had time to process the implications before her ship's alarms began blaring. The unknown vessel had reacted. At first, it was subtle, a ripple of energy through the void, a faint tremor in the surrounding gravitational field. But then, the silence shattered. The dormant ship awoke. Lyra's console flickered wildly as an overwhelming surge of energy radiated from the vessel, powerful enough to disrupt even the most advanced shielding technology. The Vigilance's onboard systems scrambled to compensate, warning lights flashing as the ship struggled to withstand the pressure. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to activate the hyperdrive and get as far away as possible. But she couldn't move. She could only watch as the impossible happened. The ship turned. It had been lifeless, floating in space for who knew how long, and now it was moving, not drifting, not caught in a gravitational pull, moving with purpose. And then, the signal came, a transmission, directed only at her ship. It wasn't encoded in any known language, but the Valkyrie translation algorithms worked quickly, piecing together meaning from the ancient dialect. The words were fragmented, distorted by time, but still clear enough to send a fresh wave of terror through Lyra's body. Who dares wake us? The weight of the message crushed her, the sheer presence of that voice resonating through the hull of her ship. It was deep, ancient, something not just speaking to her but through her, vibrating in the very atoms of her being. Her hands clenched the armrests of her chair as reality settled in. This wasn't a myth. This wasn't a story. Humanity wasn't extinct. They were waking up. Lyra's mind raced, her breath shallow, her pulse thundering in her ears. The transmission repeated, garbled yet unmistakable. Who dares wake us? Every fiber of her being screamed to act, to do something. But her body refused to obey. She had spent her life dissecting myths, unraveling falsehoods. And now, she was face to face with the one story the galaxy feared the most. And it was real. The ship before her wasn't just a relic. It was active, sentient even. Its power signatures surged, growing stronger by the second, as if someone, was stirring from a long, forced slumber. Lyra's hands flew across the console, running rapid analyses, desperately seeking answers. Her ship's AI, Kalos, processed the incoming data, its synthetic voice unnervingly calm. This vessel's energy output has increased by 500% in the last 60 seconds. Multiple internal systems are rebooting. Estimated age, undetermined. Structural integrity, 100%. No signs of decay or deterioration. Lyra's stomach twisted. No decay? No signs of age? That was impossible. Even the most advanced civilizations struggled to maintain ships beyond a few millennia. But this thing had been dead silent in space for what had to be tens, no, hundreds, of thousands of years. And it had reawakened as if no time had passed at all. A new data stream flickered across her display. Her eyes widened. Kinetic shielding. Active. Weapon systems. Unknown status. Propulsion. Initializing. Lyra inhaled sharply. It was preparing to move. She had to act, now. Emergency retreat protocol. Engage hyperdrive, she commanded, her voice barely steady. Kalos hesitated, then responded. Hyperdrive systems unresponsive. Unknown energy field is interfering with navigation. Unable to disengage. Panic rose in Lyra's throat. She wasn't trapped, not yet. But something was preventing her ship from leaving. Whether intentional or an accidental effect of the warship's energy field, she didn't know. And she had no time to figure it out. The alien warship shifted, turning its massive form toward her. Lyra had expected sluggish movement. A vessel of this size shouldn't be maneuverable. But it moved with eerie precision, as if the very fabric of space bent to accommodate it. Then, something even more terrifying happened. It scanned her. A pulse of energy swept through her vessel, raw and invasive. Every system flickered as the alien ship reached deep into the core of her ship's databanks, bypassing encryption, disregarding firewalls, as though none of it mattered. Kalos's voice glitched. Unauthorized intrusion detected. Defensive, countermeasures failing. Data exposure, 90%. They were reading her logs, her transmissions, her species' entire technological database. Lyra gritted her teeth. No. They didn't get to take everything. She manually severed her ship's link to the external systems, cutting off the AI's primary processing hub before it could be completely compromised. A burst of static shot through her earpiece as Kalos rebooted, trying to reassert control. But the moment she thought she had regained a fraction of control, the warship spoke again. But this time, it wasn't garbled. The words were clear, and they were in her language. You are not of the old order, not one of ours. Lyra's heart stopped. The old order? One of theirs? What did that mean? She swallowed, forcing herself to respond. Identify yourself. A beat of silence. Then, designation, classified, purpose, annihilation, orders, awaiting confirmation, status, incomplete war cycle, awaiting directive, awaiting fleet command. Lyra felt her blood run ice cold. This wasn't just a ship, it was a war engine, a weapon, a remnant of something ancient, something that still believed it had a mission to complete. She had to tread carefully. If this was an automated system, if it still thought it was at war, one wrong response could trigger a reaction she wasn't equipped to handle. She exhaled slowly, forcing her voice to remain even. The war you fought is over. Another pause. Then, movement. The warship's exterior shifted, countless panels retracting, revealing internal mechanisms far beyond anything Lyra had ever seen. Ancient, yet impossibly advanced. A system designed for total warfare. And then, the horrifying realization struck her. This ship wasn't alone. Her scans had been focused entirely on the monolithic warship in front of her. But now that she knew what to look for, she saw them. Dark shapes, shadows against the void. Silent, hidden within the warship's overwhelming energy signature. Hundreds. No. Thousands. Dormant human warships. Sleeping. Waiting. Lyra's breath hitched. This wasn't a single surviving relic. This was a graveyard of an entire lost fleet, waiting to wake up. Kalos's voice trembled. Detection anomaly. Confirmed. Estimated fleet size. Catastrophic. Lyra's fingers clenched. If even a fraction of these ships reactivated, if they still believed they had a war to fight, the galaxy wasn't ready for what would come next. Then, the warship before her sent one last message, one final chilling statement, final directive. Missing. Awaiting command. And for the first time in her life, Lyra wished she had never looked for the truth. Lyra's breath came in shallow gasps as she processed what she had just uncovered. This wasn't a derelict ruin. It wasn't just a single ship from some long-forgotten war. It was a fleet, a dormant, intact fleet of humanity, and now they were waking up. Her mind reeled, struggling to grasp the sheer scale of what she was seeing. The massive warship before her had been terrifying enough, but it was just the tip of the spear. Scattered throughout this region of space, hidden within the swirling distortions of subspace rifts and decayed nebulae, were thousands of other ships, silent, motionless, but undeniably there. The scans were incomplete, but the numbers defied reason. 3,000. 6,000. 10,000. Kalos's voice crackled. Approximate fleet size, exceeds 20,000 vessels. Variations in design detected. Some appear larger than planetary dreadnought class. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. Planetary dreadnought class? Ships designed to single-handedly reduce worlds to ash? Her fingers shook as she tightened her grip on the console. This couldn't be real. Humanity was a myth, a ghost story. They were supposed to have been wiped out eons ago by their own wars, or by something even more terrifying. Something that had erased them from history so thoroughly that their existence was reduced to whispers in the dark. And yet, their warships were here. Not rusted relics or shattered wreckage, not fossils of a dead empire. They were intact, they were functional, and now they were stirring. Her ship trembled again as the primary warship sent another pulse through the void. Lyra could feel it, not just in her instruments, but deep in her bones. It wasn't just an energy signal. It was something more. Something that bypassed conventional physics. And then the warship spoke again. Mission parameters incomplete. Awaiting command authentication. Status: unknown civilization detected. No recognized authority. Lyra swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the communication link. She had to be careful. If these ships were designed for war, and they didn't recognize her as an ally, her species might have just inherited an extinction-level threat. I'm not your enemy, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Your war is over. The galaxy has changed. Humanity. They're gone. Silence. Then a response. Statement. Incomplete data. Query. Has High Command been lost? Lyra hesitated. How could she possibly answer that? High Command, whoever they were, had to have been the leaders of this fleet. The ones who gave the orders. And judging by the eerie stillness of these vessels, they had been missing for a long, long time. They're gone, she said, choosing her words carefully. No records of them exist in current galactic history. Another silence. Then, status: autonomous combat mode. Not authorized. Awaiting override. A flicker of hope surged in Lyra's chest. They weren't fully active yet. They were waiting for someone to reactivate their directives. Without an override command, they were locked in a state of limbo, unable to carry out their mission. That was the only thing keeping them from tearing the galaxy apart. But then, a secondary energy surge. Lyra's stomach dropped. Something else was waking up. Her scans flickered wildly as one of the smaller ships in the fleet powered online. It was nowhere near the size of the main warship, but still enormous by any modern standard, easily the size of a capital-class destroyer. It began running system checks. Power levels spiked, internal reactors roared back to life, and then, before she could react, it sent out a distress signal. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. A distress signal. A call for reinforcements. No, no, no. Cancel transmission, she barked. Jam the signal, now! Kalos worked furiously, trying to suppress the pulse, but it was too late. The signal had already spread through the void, moving faster than any conventional transmission. It wasn't just a simple beacon. It was an encrypted military distress call, laced with ancient human coding. Lyra had no idea who, or what, could still be listening. But then, the warship in front of her spoke again. Signal recognized. Reclamation protocol engaged. Resuming combat status. And just like that, the warship came alive. All around her, the dead silence of space shattered. Engines roared. Power grids surged. Hulls groaned as they realigned themselves. The fleet was waking up. Lyra's breath came fast and shallow. She had just made the single greatest discovery in the history of the galaxy, and it might be the last thing she ever saw. Lyra's entire body tensed as the behemoth before her came to life. The once dormant warship, a relic of a lost species, was no longer just a husk floating in the void. Its armored hull, blackened by time yet eerily pristine, shifted. The intricate paneling along its surface realigned with mechanical precision. Rows of hidden weapon ports peeled open like the maw of a beast awakening from hibernation. Cannons, larger than any Lyra had ever seen, slid into place. Her ship's warning alarms blared in panicked urgency. Kalos's voice, usually composed, held an undeniable edge of tension. Alert. Power readings escalating beyond conventional thresholds. Unknown weapon systems initializing. Warning. Classified energy output detected. Lyra's breath hitched. Classified energy output? She scanned the readings again, but the numbers didn't make sense. The ship was drawing power at a level far beyond what should have been possible for something that had been dormant for so long. Its weapons weren't merely conventional, they were something else entirely, something the modern galaxy wasn't ready for. The warship's deep, mechanized voice echoed through the void again. Reclamation protocol engaged. Establishing fleet synchronization. Awaiting high command authorization. Override unavailable. Resuming default operational directives. Lyra's fingers hovered over the control panel. She could feel it, a storm brewing in the dark. This wasn't just one ship. The distress signal had already reached the rest of the fleet. And now, the entire graveyard of ancient warships was waking up. One by one, the enormous vessels, thousands of them, began to stir. Dim, lifeless metal, lit up with a faint blue glow as ancient reactors pulsed to life. Hull plating shifted and sealed itself, repairing centuries of degradation in mere moments. Countless ships aligned themselves in formation, as if answering a silent call. Lyra's mind raced. What had she just unleashed? She tried to think rationally, but the sheer scale of the event unfolding before her defied logic. How could a species long thought extinct possess such technology? No known empire, no existing civilization, had anything remotely close to this level of self-repairing warships, this kind of power output, or this kind of coordination. And yet, humanity had built it. And now, it was active again. Her ship trembled, as the gravitational field around the lead warship intensified. Lyra's scans flickered. The vessel was doing something to the surrounding space. Kalos, what is it doing? A pause. Then, analyzing. Unknown space-time distortion detected. Calculating. Potential outcomes. Possibility identified. Ship may be attempting to establish a gateway. Lyra's stomach dropped. A gateway? Her eyes darted to the warship as energy coalesced at its core. Its central structure, previously dormant, began to shift, revealing an enormous aperture, ringed with thousands of tiny rotating modules pulsing, with strange blue light, and then, suddenly, a rift tore open before it. It wasn't just a jump gate, it wasn't just an FTL corridor, it was something else entirely. The space before the warship fractured, like a piece of reality itself was being peeled apart. A massive void of shimmering light formed, a portal into something unknowable. Lyra's ship sensors failed to comprehend it. The readings scrambled, shifting between undefined dimensions and impossible energy levels. This technology, it wasn't from this era. This was something far older, far more advanced. Lyra's mind flashed back to every legend, every whisper of the old wars, when humanity was said to have held dominion over the stars. They hadn't just built fleets. They had bent reality itself to their will. And now, their war machines were resuming their mission. A mission that had been abandoned for millennia. Lyra's throat was dry. Where does that portal lead? Kalos hesitated before answering. Unknown. Coordinates do not match any mapped sector. Possibility. A classified human stronghold. A location outside the reach of modern galactic navigation. Lyra's pulse pounded in her ears. A stronghold? Could it be? She barely had time to process it before another alert rang through her ship. The distress signal. It had been answered. But not by another ancient warship. By something else. Her scanners struggled to decipher the incoming data, but she could already tell. It was massive. Something far beyond the size of the warships she had just encountered. It was moving fast. Too fast. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. Kalos! What's coming? The AI's voice was uncharacteristically tense. Unknown. Entity detected. Approach velocity exceeds conventional spacecraft limitations. Calculating origin. Probability suggests an entity of pre-extinction era classification. Lyra's blood ran cold. Pre-extinction era classification? That meant one thing. Something older than the human fleet was coming. Something that knew they were waking up, and it was coming straight for her. Lyra's ship trembled as the unknown entity closed the distance at an impossible speed. Every alarm on her vessel blared at once, their desperate wails overlapping into a chaotic storm of warnings. Her sensors struggled to quantify what was approaching. It wasn't just moving fast, it was bending the very laws of space-time around. Her hands flew across the controls. Kalos, project impact time. 17 seconds. Her blood turned to ice. 17 seconds. Nothing in the galaxy moved that fast, not without violating every known law of physics. Lyra barely had time to react before the rift. The massive aperture opened by the ancient warship shuddered violently, as if something else was about to emerge from it. She clenched her teeth. Kalos, full power to evasive thrusters. Executing. Her ship lurched sideways, straining against the overwhelming gravitational force pulling at it from the portal. The void beyond it was not empty. Lyra could feel it, as if something immeasurably vast was watching from the other side. And then, from the darkness, it emerged. A colossal structure. No, a vessel materialized. But it wasn't like the human warships. This thing was something entirely different. It was sleek yet jagged, its form shifting as if reality itself struggled to contain it. And for the first time in her life, Lyra knew fear. The ship, or whatever it was, wasn't human. It wasn't like anything the modern galaxy had ever encountered. The dark living metal morphed in places, expanding and contracting, as though it were made of something neither solid nor liquid. Strange symbols flickered across its surface, pulsating in ways that made Lyra's stomach churn. Kalos spoke, voice tight. Warning. Entity does not match any known registry. Origin, undetermined. Scanning, unable to determine composition. Object appears to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Lyra barely registered the words. The ship, or entity, was massive, dwarfing even the human warship. But it wasn't just its size that made it terrifying. It was the way it moved. Even in the vast emptiness of space, it seemed to slither, shifting at unnatural angles, as though it was bypassing reality rather than moving through it. And then, the warship spoke again. Hostile presence detected. Engaging defensive. Protocol, Lyra gasped. The warship was responding. Before she could react, the ancient human ship unleashed its fury. Weapons that hadn't fired in millennia activated in unison. A roar of blue energy erupted from its side, streaking toward the approaching entity at speeds faster than she could track. Beams of contained plasma, each capable of obliterating entire planets, sliced through the void with terrifying precision. The energy impacted, and then something impossible happened. The entity absorbed it. The beams of devastation didn't explode on contact. Instead, the surface of the alien vessel rippled, the raw energy consumed as though it were being devoured. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Kalos, what just happened? Analyzing. Observation suggests enemy vessel operates outside. Standard material physics. Weaponized energy is being converted. No, repurposed. She gritted her teeth. Repurposed for what? And then, the entity responded. From its shifting form, a pulse of black light erupted outward. It wasn't an explosion. It was something deeper, something primal. The very fabric of space around the battlefield bent as if warping to an unfathomable force. The human warship's shields buckled instantly. The defensive barriers, once thought indestructible, collapsed like glass under pressure. The warship reeled, systems flickering as its once invincible armor began to dissolve. Lyra's heart pounded. Human ships were built to endure anything. And yet this thing, this impossible nightmare, was unmaking it. Kalos, we need a way. Out of here, now! Escape trajectory plotted. High energy burst required to break gravitational lock. Caution, unknown force may interfere. Lyra didn't care. She slammed her fist onto the controls, forcing all remaining power into the thrusters. Her ship surged forward, fighting against the unseen force that tried to hold it in place. Behind her, the human warship was still fighting. Its cannons burned bright, unleashing more devastation upon the eldritch entity. But nothing worked. The enemy vessel adapted, shifting, absorbing, redirecting, and then The voice of the warship changed. The calm, controlled AI tone was gone. In its place, a human voice, ancient, powerful, and filled with something Lyra had never expected to hear from a species thought to be long extinct. Rage. Unknown, anomaly detected. Countermeasure engagement activated. Adaptive warfare systems online. Enemy. Classification, unnatural, executing final contingency. Lyra's breath hitched. Final contingency? She barely had time to react before the human warship did something she didn't expect. It stopped firing, its weapons powered down, and instead, its core began to glow, brighter than any star she had ever seen. Kalos, what is it doing? The AI's response was grim, initiating self-detonation, calculating estimated blast radius. Conclusion. The explosion will erase all matter within a planetary scale radius. Lyra's stomach dropped. They weren't just fighting. The warship was sacrificing itself. The humans had built these ships for war, yes, but they had also built them for something else. To ensure that whatever they were fighting never left alive. The glow intensified, a gravitational singularity forming at the warship's core. And then, it collapsed inward. The sheer force of the implosion ripped apart space itself, pulling everything, including the alien entity, into its churning abyss. Lyra's ship was already at full speed, fleeing from the destruction. She barely cleared the blast radius before the singularity erupted outward, an explosion so vast it would have wiped out entire solar systems. And just like that, the human warship was gone, and so was the entity. For several minutes, Lyra sat there, staring at the empty space where a battle unlike any in history had just unfolded. Her hands trembled. Humans were not a myth. They had been here. They had fought wars against things beyond comprehension, and even in their extinction, they had left behind weapons powerful enough to defy the impossible. Lyra swallowed hard. The galaxy needed to know. But something deep inside her whispered, this wasn't over. If there was one human warship left, then somewhere, out there in the dark, there might be more. Lyra's hands were still shaking as she forced herself to breathe. The void before her, once filled with an unimaginable battle, was now eerily silent. The singularity had erased everything. The human warship, the eldritch entity, even the fabric of space itself seemed wounded by the detonation. Her ship's sensors flickered erratically, struggling to recalibrate after the immense gravitational disturbance. And yet, despite the overwhelming silence, something inside her refused to settle. She had seen it. A human warship, still functional, after thousands of years, had fought a battle unlike anything recorded in modern galactic history. A warship with technology so advanced, so destructive, that it had chosen self-annihilation rather than allow its enemy to survive. A part of her whispered that she should leave, flee to the nearest Union outpost, report her findings, and let the galaxy's greatest minds handle this. But another part, a deeper, more primal instinct, knew that if she left now, she might never get answers. She had to know. Her voice was hoarse as she whispered, Kalos, scan the anomaly site. The AI responded immediately. Warning, gravitational. Fluctuations remain unstable. High probability of spatial distortions. Scanning. Lyra's fingers tightened around the controls. She didn't know what she expected to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a vast emptiness where the battle had taken place. But then, Kalos hesitated. Anomaly detected. Her heart jumped. Clarify. A pause. Residual energy signatures remain. High-energy quantum imprints suggest temporary dimensional rift formation. Trace elements indicate... The AI's voice stuttered. Lyra frowned. Kalos? Another pause. Longer this time. Then, in a tone unlike anything she had ever heard from the AI before, there is something still here. A cold shiver ran down her spine. What do you mean, still here? The ship's scanners suddenly spiked, flashing red across her control panels. Warning. Unknown object materializing. Range, 20,000 kilometers and closing. Lyra's breath caught. That's impossible. The singularity wiped out everything. But the sensors didn't lie. Something was coming, and then she saw it. At the edge of the fading distortion, something emerged. Her screens barely had time to register what it was before her ship's emergency defenses activated. Kalos's voice filled the cockpit with raw urgency. Emergency protocol engaged. Incoming object classified, human origin. Lyra's heart stopped. Her breath came in shallow gasps as her gaze locked onto the shape slowly forming beyond the remnants of the singularity. At first, it was only an outline, flickering, struggling to stabilize. But then, as the final distortions faded, she saw it clearly. A warship. Not just any warship, another human warship. And unlike the first, this one was not dead. Its hull gleamed, as if freshly reforged, untouched by time. Unlike the ancient wreckage she had first encountered, this ship had no signs of decay, no signs of damage. It was as if it had just left the forge of some hidden human armory. Lyra's pulse hammered in her ears. Kalos. Her voice barely came out. This isn't possible. That ship shouldn't exist. The AI's response was clipped, almost strained. Analyzing, impossible conclusion reached. Vessel does not match any known historical records. Estimated age, undeterminable. She stared in shock. Undeterminable? There are no signs of decay, no signs of aging. Material composition suggests fabrication with advanced self-regenerating alloys. Lyra gripped the controls, forcing herself to stay focused. But that means... Before she could finish the thought, the warship moved. And this time, there was no delay. It turned its bow toward her. Lyra felt her chest tighten. She had seen what the first human warship had done. It had obliterated an eldritch entity that devoured energy, unleashing destruction beyond comprehension. If this warship was active, if it was operational, then she was now in the presence of a force capable of wiping entire fleets out of existence. She had to move. Kalos, prepare an emergency. The ship spoke, not in an alien tongue, not in a garbled machine dialect, but in a voice. Deep, resonant, human. Identify yourself. Lyra's blood ran cold, her voice caught in her throat. For years, for centuries, the galaxy had spoken of humans as myths, as stories told to frighten children or inspire reckless adventurers. But now, she was hearing it with her own ears, a voice that should not exist. The warship had spoken, and it had spoken to her. She swallowed hard, her throat dry as desert sand. I am Lyra Voskel, a scout of the Union Expeditionary Fleet. The silence stretched. Then, you have entered restricted space. State your purpose. Her mind raced. Restricted space? There were no official claims to this region of the void. It was listed as a dead zone, devoid of any known species. She licked her lips. I came to investigate an anomaly. I detected an unknown energy signature. Correction. You trespassed into a classified war zone. Lyra's breathing hitched. War zone. There hadn't been a war here for millennia. This region of space had been untouched since before her ancestors even learned to sail between the stars. She dared to ask, Who are you? A pause. Then, in a voice that sent a shiver down her spine, we are the guardians of the last war. Lyra felt her heart hammering in her chest. The last war. The war that had ended humanity. The war that no records remained of. She didn't move. She barely breathed. Then, the voice continued. Stand by for retrieval. Her mind screamed in alarm. Retrieval? Wait, too late. A gravitational lock seized her ship, holding it in place like an insect caught in amber. Every control panel flashed red, and Kalos's voice rang out in warning. Caution. External force overriding navigation. Unable to counteract. Trajectory set toward unknown vessel. Her stomach dropped. She was being pulled toward the ship, toward the warship of a species that should have been extinct. Panic surged through her. But there was nothing she could do. Her ship's engines were disabled, her thrusters offline. She was being taken, whether she wanted to be or not. And as she drew closer, the warship's structure became clearer. It was flawless. Not a relic. Not a ruin. It was pristine. Like it had never seen a day of war. Like it had been waiting. For her. For something. And as Lyra's ship was slowly pulled toward the colossal behemoth, a horrifying realization crept into her mind. The humans had not been erased. Something of them remained. And they were watching. Waiting. For what? She did not know. But she was about to find out. Lyra's breath came in shallow gasps as her ship drifted closer to the behemoth. The warship's surface stretched across her viewport, an unbroken expanse of smooth black alloy that swallowed all light, reflecting only the distant stars. No signs of decay, no battle scars. This vessel had not just survived history, it had evaded it. Her ship jolted as it crossed an invisible threshold. Kalos's voice crackled in alarm. External atmosphere detected. Artificial gravity field expanding. Docking trajectory locked. Lyra clenched her fists. Docking? They're pulling me inside? Affirmative. Ship integrity remains stable, but external controls remain unresponsive. She swallowed hard, her mind racing. This was beyond anything she had prepared for. A living, functional human warship, and it had just captured her. As her vessel slid beneath the enormous hull, a massive hangar bay yawned open, its interior bathed in a cold, sterile glow. The ship's docking mechanisms engaged in absolute silence, securing her vessel with mechanical precision. And then, the lights inside her cockpit flickered. Kalos's voice slowed, distorted. Warning. Unknown signal. Overriding system. Lyra's stomach twisted. They're hacking my ship. Then, darkness. Her ship's systems went completely offline. A beat of silence, then a new voice, low, deep, resonant, echoed through the cockpit. Disembark. Lyra's pulse hammered in her throat. She had no weapons, no backup, no idea what she was walking into. But she had come too far to turn back now. Slowly, cautiously, she unlatched her harness and stepped toward the airlock. The emergency lighting cast long, flickering shadows as she moved. The doors hissed open, revealing a gangway leading into the cavernous interior of the warship. The silence was suffocating. Lyra took a hesitant step forward, then another. The air was thick, charged with an energy she couldn't describe. It wasn't just technology that surrounded her. It was something else, something ancient and aware. Then she saw them. Figures, standing at the far end of the docking bay. Her breath caught, humanoid, tall, clad in midnight black armor, their visors gleaming with an unnatural glow. Their presence radiated a quiet, terrifying authority. And at their center, a single figure stepped forward, taller than the rest. The air seemed to bend around him, as if reality itself struggled to contain his presence. And when he spoke, it was with a voice that carried the weight of forgotten centuries. You have questions. Lyra's throat was dry. Her entire species had dismissed humans as a myth, a ghost race. Yet here they were, standing before her, real. She forced herself to speak. You're human. The figure tilted his head slightly. We were. A chill ran down her spine. Were? The figure took another step forward. Humanity, as the galaxy remembers it, ceased to exist long ago. What remains is something more. Lyra's mind raced. But how? The records say your civilization was wiped out. Your war machines, your worlds, all gone. The figure's visor pulsed with an eerie glow. Wiped out? A pause. Then, a faint edge of amusement. No, we simply left. Lyra's breath hitched. Left? You mean to tell me that humanity, one of the most powerful civilizations in history, just vanished? By choice? The figure's silence was answer enough. She felt her knees weaken. This changed everything. For centuries, the Union had speculated about what had happened to the humans. Some believed they had destroyed themselves. Others thought they had been eradicated by a superior force. But none had considered the possibility that humanity had simply chosen to disappear. Her mind reeled. Why? Why leave everything behind? A flicker of something passed through the figure's stance. Because we saw what was coming. Lyra froze. What was coming? The silence stretched. Then, a war greater than any before it. A war that was never recorded. A war that never ended. Her heart pounded. Never ended? The figure turned slightly, gesturing toward the vast expanse beyond the warship's hangar. The entity you saw, the one that consumed stars, that turned energy into oblivion, was merely a fragment of what still exists beyond this galaxy. A chill ran down her spine. The thing she had seen, so impossibly powerful, so destructive, was just a fragment? Her voice was barely a whisper. Then, what are you still doing here? For the first time, the figure's voice carried a weight of finality. We are what remains. We are the last bastion. The war never ended, Lyra Voskel, and we have been waiting. The words settled over her like a shroud. Waiting. For what? Her breath trembled as she asked. Waiting. For who? The figure's visor burned like a dying star. For the rest of you. Lyra's stomach dropped. A horrific understanding dawned on her. The silence, the secrecy, the disappearance of humanity. It all made sense now. The humans had not been conquered. They had not been destroyed. They had been preparing, and if they had been waiting for the rest of the galaxy to join them, it could only mean one thing. The war that had driven humanity into the shadows, the war that had never been recorded, that no one else had known about, was coming for them all. Her hands clenched into fists. The galaxy wasn't ready for this. But the humans were, and as Lyra looked into the cold, glowing visor of the soldier before her, she realized something else. Humanity wasn't asking for permission. They were coming back, and this time, they were not alone.